Good morning to everyone who is here with us. My name is Janet Fisher. I am the administrator of the Arizona Talking Book Library. Today is March 19, 2020. It is 50 years after the grand opening of this library, the Arizona Talking Book Library. So I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome you to our commemoration celebration for the 50th anniversary of this library. We had our grand opening on March 19, 1970 as a regional network library within the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, NLS. We have continued to serve eligible Arizonans through this program since that time. There are many people and organizations to recognize and thank that we've worked with over the years, and I just wanted to point a few of those out. I wanted to mention my predecessors, the previous directors of this library. It started out with Arlene Bunsell, who was followed by Richard Peel, and then Linda Montgomery. I also want to recognize, since we are a branch of the State Library Archives and Public Records, I would like to recognize the state librarians that have served during that same 50-year time period, and that would be Marguerite Cooley, Sharon Womack, Arlene Bunsell, Gladys Ann Wells, Joan Clark, and Holly Henley. I also would like to mention our active friends group that is in existence now. They have been a big help with our fundraising that has enabled our book recording program within our library, and they support our volunteers. That is the Arizona Friends of Talking Books, and their current president is Caitlin Wright. We do have a couple of partner groups, the Sun Sounds of Arizona and Recorded Recreational Reading for the Blind. Having this celebration remotely, there were two groups that are not able to connect with today who had been scheduled as part of our open house. You can connect with them separately or contact the library, and we will find a way for you to get a connection to them. One was Maricopa County presenting a booth, an exhibit on accessible voting, and the other was Census 2020. Both are very important to this community for this year. Please get out and vote, and also make sure you respond to the census. One group that I don't want to forget mentioning are our volunteers. Over the years, we have had hundreds of volunteers working with us, making the behind-the-scenes work with our staff so that we could do things more smoothly. We could get the books out to you faster. We could complete our functions. They could read and review the audio books. They could repair the machines. They are a wonderful group, and I thank them very much, and I'm sure some of you on the line are some of our volunteers. I appreciate you a lot. So again, we are recording this event. If for some reason you have to leave the conference, know that you can get back to the recording later. So today we have people who are joining us, friends of our library, and I want to name the people first, and then we will one by one activate them so that they can present their speech, and you can all listen in. First is Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs. We, as a library within the State Library Archives and Public Records, are a part of the Secretary of State's office, and I am dying to hear the proclamation that she is presenting, so I look forward to that. She will be followed by Bob Kresmer, the current chair of the Arizona Governor's Council on Blindness and Visual Impairment. Bob will be followed by Ms. Eddie Richardson, who is the executive director of the Lions Foundation of Arizona. This group has been very important to us over the years. And then following all of them, we have an out-of-town special guest. We have Karen Keninger, Director of the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, connecting to us from Washington, D.C. and I look forward to listening to her speech also. What I'd like to do at this point is introduce you to our current state librarian, Holly Henley, who will introduce Secretary Hobbs.
Thank you, Janet. Congratulations to you and the outstanding staff and volunteers here at the Arizona Talking Book Library. Here's so many stories of how the resources and services you all provide free of charge are a lifeline to the blind and print disabled in our state. Audiobooks and magazines, movies with audio descriptions, braille books and magazines by postage-free mail, and special equipment to play the audiobooks. For those who prefer to use their computers, tablets, and smartphones, there's the option to download from BARD, the Braille and Audio Reading Downloads. In addition, patrons have access to the National Federation of the Blind's Newsline, over 300 newspapers and magazines by phone and online, and of course the outstanding reader advisory services by the staff of the Arizona Talking Book Library. So today we're celebrating 50 years of service by the Arizona Talking Book Library. It's most appropriate that to kick off this celebration, we have a special guest who has led a life of service, Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs. Beginning as a volunteer at her church and continuing with her job as a social worker and chief compliance officer at one of the largest domestic violence centers in the United States, the focus of her life has been to help others to gain security, to be heard, and to create better lives. That fundamental motivation inspired her to run for Arizona Secretary of State after serving in the Arizona House of Representatives and Arizona Senate as Minority Leader. Now she brings her years of experience to the office of the Secretary of State to ensure that it runs productively and that Arizona elections are secure, fair, and efficient. Secretary Hobbs is now just over a year into her term. The Arizona State Library Archives and Public Records is one of the divisions her office oversees. She has been a strong supporter of our mission to provide access and preserve Arizona. We are so happy to have her speak to us today as we celebrate the Arizona Talking Book Library's 50 years of service, providing access to the blind and print disabled in our state.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you, Janet. I am so honored to take part in this unique Talking Book Library's 50th anniversary celebration. I wish we could all be together in person, but as we all navigate through this pandemic, I'm just amazed at the creativity and adaptability that everybody is showing so that we can continue as much activity as possible in these unprecedented times. My office supports the state library in its work throughout the state and through the work of the Arizona Talking Book Library, and is striving to ensure that all may read. The Secretary of State's office believes in the value of these services to communities that include those who cannot read or use regular print materials as a result of temporary or permanent visual or physical limitations. And as Janet mentioned, we do have a proclamation, so I'm going to read that. Whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library was established and held its grand opening on March 19, 1970 as the Arizona Regional Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. It remains a part of the Arizona State Library, Archives, and Public Records, a division of the Arizona Secretary of State, and serves as a regional outreach of the Library of Congress, National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library serves more than 9,500 individual patrons and 130 institutions, providing free Braille and talking book library services for people with temporary or permanent low vision, blindness, or physical disability that prevents them from reading or holding the printed page. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library provides eligible readers with Braille, audiobooks, and playback equipment, and as well as the Braille and audio reading download services for downloading electronic versions of audio and Braille materials on behalf of the Library of Congress National Library Service. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library produces audio materials on Arizona or written by Arizona authors, and also offers popular programs including book discussions in person and by telephone. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library collaborates with other agencies and organizations to provide access to magazines, newspapers, and job listings for people with visual impairments through the National Federation of the Blind's Newsline service, and in connection with Sun Sounds for patrons to enjoy local and community audio newspapers. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library is an active ex officio member of the Governor's Council on Blindness and Visual Impairment, with the Secretary of State's office hosting the iknow.az.gov resource directory website. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library provides services and materials to people in every county in Arizona and has an active friends group, the Arizona Friends of Talking Books, and provides additional support for its audio recording program and services. And whereas the Arizona Talking Book Library is celebrating 50 years of service. Now, therefore, I, Secretary of State, do hereby celebrate March 19th, 2020 as Arizona Talking Book Library Day. Thank you so much, Janet and your team, for your hard work in organizing this event. I know that this isn't what you had in mind when you first started planning, but you have made the most of a stressful situation, and congratulations. This is such a momentous anniversary. Thank you so much for having me be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Secretary Hobbs. You know, your proclamation, I appreciate having the proclamation there. It is the first time I've been aware of a proclamation being given that was in standard print, and we also have a large print and a Braille copy that have been made to recognize the needs of our community. We can also offer, if our patrons would like to hear it, we could make an audio copy. So I appreciate that very much.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yes. It is a pleasure working with you, and I do appreciate your leadership. So
thank you.
I'm muting you. Sorry, Secretary. Okay, I want to turn now to our next speaker, who is Bob Kresmer. Bob is the current chair of the Arizona Governor's Council on Blindness and Visual Impairment. I first met Bob since we were both members of the Governor's Council, but my connection increased with discussions of Newsline, since Bob, at the time that I came in and we were working on contracts, he chaired the National Federation of the Blind, Arizona. He's my go-to guy and a great resource for us in this state. So let me turn you over to Bob Kresmer.
Thank you, Janet. All right. So the Governor's Council on Blindness was formed by the governor a number of years back. It's composed of representatives of and for the blindness community in Arizona, and our job is to report back to the governor and to the legislatures about the agencies that serve the blind, agencies of and for the blind, and to report on the most unmet needs of blind Arizonans and how these agencies are striving and doing their job in meeting those needs. The Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library is built into the Governor's Council. The administrator of the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library is, by force of the Governor's edict, automatically a member. And in Janet Fisher's case and Linda Montgomery's case, they have become very active and a very supportive part to the community for blind people in Arizona. Back when our country was first started, Benjamin Franklin, the father of liberty and individual freedom, knew that in order for citizens of America to be current and good voters and able to participate in the nation's affairs, had to have literacy and access to books and current information. Benjamin Franklin formed one of the first lending libraries in the country, and with that began the tradition of making sure that American citizens had access to books, had access to current information, and were assisted in literacy in every way possible. Back in the early part of the 20th century, the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, they call that at the moment, established through charity and then by law a library that would preserve and enlarge the role of literacy in the lives of blind people. It preserved and encouraged and helped develop the use of Braille all across the country in every age group, and made available free of charge both classical fiction and nonfiction, current event books, and information that would find its way to blind people so that blind people could continue to be part of the community in America and increase their odds of better education, and through that, a better opportunity for equal employment and opportunities in the community. So the history of the National Library Service has been rich in cultivating opportunities for the blind. In Arizona, 50 years ago, the establishment of the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library helped to preserve the use of Braille and helped get Braille into everybody's hands who needed or wanted it. And the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library made sure that the classical fiction, classics, the entertainment, recreational reading, and also nonfiction and technical information and educational information was available free of charge and at the tips of every blind person, visually impaired person, and print disabled person in Arizona. They have done a terrific job. They've done yeoman's job. They've become an integral part of the community in Arizona. The reader advisors that work for the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library make it extremely easy for people, especially older people, who are newly blind or visually impaired or print disabled, to get over that big discouraging hump of not being able to read books or magazines any longer, and help them to learn how to use the system, how to tap into the library, how to use the Braille and audio reading downloads so that they can download directly into their telephones or computers or smart devices books that are up to date. So a blind person and print impaired person who needs to or wants to can have access to the latest right off the presses New York Times bestsellers, as well as the stodgiest and economically based and research-based nonfiction that is available to all of the sighted public. You know, when we're watching television, we're watching a current event show on television or radio, and an expert talking head starts to talk about how he's relevant to the current world and mentions his latest book or the books that he's written, I'm able to go to the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library or the BARD download, and sure enough, there's his book, and I can, or her book, and I can download it and read along about all the things that this expert is talking about. As far as current events, you know, I can read the latest political tome, whether it's by Rachel Maddow or it's by Bill O'Reilly. It's available to me almost immediately at the same time as it is to the rest of the world. That's only because the National Library Service, the Arizona Braille and Talking Book, and our Secretary of State recognizes that in order for us as being part of the community, need to be current in current events, need to be literate, and need to have access to the same information that everybody else has. You know, I went into a 7th grade classroom where there was a blind student, and that blind student had presented his current events paper, and he had his little footnotes, and in his footnotes was the information that he got from the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library. You know, when I was working on an advanced degree, I would write a thesis or papers, and in my footnotes, I would put down information that I got from the National Library Service or Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library that was as immediately available to me as it was to anybody else. We're also celebrating the 20th anniversary of the National Federation of the Blind NFB Newsline, which is the availability of hundreds of newspapers and magazines that are available to the sighted public are now available to people in Arizona through the NFB Newsline, either through their telephone, their smart speaker, their smartphones and other electronic devices. And so they can read along their hometown newspaper, whether it's the Milwaukee, Wisconsin newspaper, or it's the New York Times or Chicago Tribune, and then be able to read a number of magazines, whether it's the Atlantic Monthly or AARP News, so that they can be kept current and so that they can participate in local discussions. And when it's time to go to their local politicians' town hall meeting, they can speak knowledgeably and participate as knowledgeable voters and citizens. You know, the Arizona Braille and Talk Library, as a state, part of a state agency, is almost unique in the fact that it has an extremely effective outreach program so that they can send Christine Tuttle or others out into the community anywhere in Arizona and identify blind and newly blind and visually impaired people, where they live, and make them aware of the Braille and Talking Book Library. And through that Braille and Talking Book Library, they then become integrated into the system and then can become eligible for rehabilitation or individual training about how to live better as a sight-impaired person. The whole system hangs together, and it all works to the benefit of keeping blind people independent, well-educated, and able to become competitively employed. I want to do a shout out to Secretary of State Hobbs because of the continued support and funding that the state does. Blind people then and visually impaired people, new and old, students or senior citizens, are able to be integral parts of the community and able to continue to cast votes knowledgeably and interact with their communities. I want to thank the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library for that they do in outreach, in the encouragement that their reader advisors give to newly blind people, and the integral part they are of the Governor's Council on Blindness. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate your kind words, and I hope more people become active in the Arizona Governor's Council, or at least pay attention to the work of that group. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
So let me move forward. I'm going to next introduce you to Ms. Eddie Richardson. She is the Executive Director of the Lions Foundation of Arizona. And she's a great resource for us and a great neighbor for the library. The Lions Foundation, I'm sure she will tell you, has been continuously connected to our library. So let me turn it over to Eddie.
Okay, thank you. The Lions Foundation of Arizona, Knights of the Blind, took the project over of building the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library facility for the state of Arizona. With their specifications on what they needed, we accomplished that for them with pride. Till this day, the partnership does continue. The services that the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library provides to the community is priceless. It's just amazing how many people they help, and it's right where the Lions are all about and right where the mission is of helping the blind and visually impaired. And I commend you for your 50 years of service to the community. Happy anniversary, 50-year anniversary, and congratulations. I look forward to continuing that partnership and just looking at the priceless and timeless limited offers you are able to help these individuals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate it. And, you know, people may not remember the fact that the Lions have had a facility available for us to rent or mortgage since the very beginning. So we have always been connected to you in a great way. And we really appreciate you being there.
Yep, a great friendship we have had, definitely.
That's correct. What I would like to do now is let you know that I've had the privilege during the time I've headed up the Arizona Talking Book Library of working with the National Library Service under the leadership of Karen Keninger. Her innovation and commitment to providing a program that addresses the needs of our community of users and strives to innovate and introduce new things along the way is just amazing. Both Holly Henley, the state librarian, and I have worked with Karen, so I also wanted to invite Holly Henley to say a few words of introduction for Karen.
Thank you, Janet. As you said, the Arizona Talking Book Library is a regional library of the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled in the Library of Congress. And it's our pleasure today to have Karen Keninger, Director of the National Library Service, to speak to us. Karen Keninger became Director of the National Library Service at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. in March of 2012. She is the first person who is blind to direct the Braille and Talking Book program. Ms. Keninger is former Director of the Iowa Department for the Blind, a provider of vocational rehabilitation and independent living programs and library services for blind and visually impaired individuals. We're so happy to have you with us today. Welcome, Ms. Keninger.
Well, thank you so very much for that lovely introduction. I am absolutely delighted to be able to participate in your 50th anniversary celebration today. And I'm really disappointed that I wasn't able to be there in person. I was really looking forward to a visit to Arizona, and I had been there a few years ago when one of the regional conferences was held at the Arizona Library, and was looking forward to doing that again. But unfortunately, as we all know, the coronavirus situation has stepped in to have my boss say no travel. So I do note that in very typical fashion, Janet is making the very best of this situation. By doing so, she's reaching out to more people virtually than will probably be able to be there in person. So thank you, Janet, and congratulations for being creative and flexible for something that is as important as a 50th anniversary celebration. So does anybody remember the year 1970? Well, I must confess, I do. I graduated from high school that year. I was just a baby, of course, no math, please. But I must confess that I was really taken aback one day when I was sitting here in my office in Washington looking through our books, and I saw that a book set in the 1970s was listed as historical fiction. How could that be? Well, it was 50 years, I guess. That was the year when Richard Nixon was the president, and the Vietnam War was going on, and Diana Ross was topping the charts with Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And there was a new house. You could buy a new house that year for $23,400. I wish. The Beatles sang Let It Be, and then they announced they were splitting up. You do remember the Beatles, right? And the VCR debuted. The Apollo 13 made its harrowing way back to Earth. And we were watching movies like Patton and Love Story and Little Big Man and MASH. And then during that year, on March 19th of that year, something else very important happened, and that was the initiation of the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library. The Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library was actually launched on that day, and it became a new member of the NLS network. And it brought there had been some NLS service in Arizona before that, but having your own library brought a real local service to the residents of Arizona. And that local service included the regional knowledge that is so important to an area and the flavor that is unique to the state. And with its magazine program and its book production throughout the years, the library has not only contributed tremendously to the citizens of Arizona, but it has also shared that wealth across the nation through the NLS program as well. During its 50 years, the Arizona Library has had only 4 regional librarians, as Janet mentioned earlier, and this is a circumstance that has created stability and forward momentum for the program. Arlene Bonsold served from the beginning in 1970 until 1980, when Richard Peel took over for the next 14 years, and he passed the baton to my friend Linda Montgomery, who served for 21 years, and during the time that I was a librarian in Iowa, she was a leader in the network, and then handed it over to Janet 5 years ago. So 4 librarians in 50 years. You've had three different locations, and including your current space, and your sub-regionals in Flagstaff and Prescott had their day in the sun, and you moved the machine lending agency to the library in 1980. So a rich history of change and advancement over those 50 years. And today, at 50, the Arizona State Braille and Talking Book Library serves all of the state of Arizona with some 7,000 patrons. In 2019, you circulated over 320,000 books. That's an average of some 47 titles per patron. Big readers out there in Arizona. And in addition, Arizona patrons downloaded nearly 117,000 books, magazines, and musical scores from BARD. And speaking of BARD, the Arizona Library has been a major contributor to BARD since 2014. You've added 266 books to our program, and they're all high quality and that you produced in your studios, and we're looking forward to more. You've added Arizona history, Arizona cooking, and Arizona travel to complement regional and general fiction as well. NLS has been very pleased to count Arizona as a full partner in the service for the past 50 years. And now, what's coming in the next, well, if not 50, then at least the next 5 to 10 years for both the Arizona State Braille and Talking Book Library and the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled and all of our other partners. One of the biggest changes that will affect both the libraries and the patrons that we serve in the near term is our move away from a one book, one cartridge model. We're moving to a system that produces customized cartridges with multiple titles on them, and each cartridge is created specifically for the person who is going to receive it. And we'll do this on an ongoing basis. So rather than getting one book on a cartridge each time you go to the mailbox, you might get 10. I'm not quite sure how many Arizona is going to be putting on, but this is going to be 10 books of your very own choice. If you're a patron, you might want a whole series on one cartridge. That'll be an option. You might want a collection of cookbooks or whatever a person would want will be available. We started this process with the magazines on cartridge program several years ago. The program took some getting used to for people, but it has been successful. Patrons receive cartridges containing the most current issues of just the magazines that they want to read and no others. So here's our customized cartridge right there. The next iteration, which Arizona is working on now, is to send just-in-time customized cartridges to patrons, which will contain multiple titles, as I said, of their specific preference. This project arose out of abundance, an abundance of books available to be precise. Over the last several years, we at NLS have actually tripled the number of titles that we can make available each year. New titles, that is. But the question came of how do we make them all available to all of the people who want them within the budget that we have. We have way more titles, but we don't have way more cartridges. And the other thing was how do we facilitate national circulation of the 8,000 and counting titles that the libraries like Arizona are contributing to BARD. So the solution that we came up with is this new paradigm of just-in-time customized cartridges. With the new system, each library will be able to very easily create these custom-loaded cartridges that have several books on them drawn, again, from all of our titles, not just the ones that are on the cartridges. It will include the BARD exclusive titles that we've done for the last few years, and it will include the ability to put the network titles like the Arizona titles on those cartridges as well. This allows a much wider selection of titles to choose from. We have 880 some, I should have gotten the number, 80-some thousand titles on BARD right now, and all of those titles will be available through this program. And at the same time, it gives you, the patron, exactly the books that you want. We've modified the Talking Book machine software so that it's easier to move from one book to another on the cartridge. You can either use the bookshelf feature or you can just press play at the end of the previous book and this next one will start. So we're happy about that. So that's one of the exciting change that is in process right now. And another exciting change that is coming soon is brought to us through the Marrakesh Treaty. Congress has passed a revision to our governing law and that conforms it with the Marrakesh Treaty and the Marrakesh Treaty Implementation Act. And I won't go into what all that means, except to say what it's going to do. It's going to give NLS and the Arizona Library and all of our patrons access to a much larger pool of titles from our international colleagues, and also in a variety of languages, including English, but other foreign languages. That includes, for example, books in Spanish from Spain and from Latin America, and books in French and German and many other languages around the world. We will also be sharing our collection so that people outside the United States will have access to a lot of our materials as well. We're working on implementing that process at this point and hope to launch it within the next several months. Another project that is well underway is aimed at our Braille readers. We are in the process of developing and testing a Braille e-reader for the NLS program. This is a refreshable Braille device, and it will be provided so that our patrons can use digital files to read Braille, which they can either download from BARD directly into the device, or they can get from the network libraries if they don't have Wi-Fi. They can get them on a cartridge and plug them into the device. This project will go into pilot testing phase by the summer and will be rolled out to the NLS network in stages over the next several years. The advantages of this project for Braille readers is that we will be able to provide a lot more material, and we will make other types of material available to our patrons, because with electronic files we don't have to emboss them, we don't have to bind them, and we don't have to stand them on library shelves. That will save us money, which we can then convert into more books, which is what we all want. It's also very convenient to use a Braille e-reader because it's small and very portable, and you can have lots of books on the card in it. So I'm really very excited about this project. We're also exploring options for the next generation of our digital talking book player. We are hoping that a voice user interface will make it easy for everyone to use. It will work similar to Alexa or Siri or Google Home, all of those interfaces that we've become quite accustomed to in our homes, at least a lot of us have. We have a lot of work to do on this particular project, but we do have a good start. And we know that it won't meet everyone's needs, so we can expect to have the current players and cartridges around for a long time. But we're looking forward to moving into a much more digital era in that regard. We're working on a couple of other changes as well. we're working on a project to make it easier for people with reading disabilities to sign up for NLS service. For the longest time, since the 1970s, 50 years probably, as a matter of fact, they have had to get a doctor's certificate saying that they had a reading disability before they were allowed to use the program. And we want to change that to make that easier for them to sign up by having a broader range of certifying authorities. So the first phase of that project is a pilot with Texas and Pennsylvania, which allows people with reading disabilities to be certified by a broader range of authorities, not just those doctors of medicine. The pilots are going well, and the results will help us determine when we can implement this change nationally in the next year or so. One of the issues is that we expect more people to join the program, and we need to make sure we have the capacity to serve. Now, more local to the NLS headquarters in Washington, D.C., we're hoping to find a new location closer to Capitol Hill. One huge benefit to this relocation for us would be that it would give our program a much higher visibility. Right now we are located up in a neighborhood in Northwest Washington, which nobody ever gets to. If we were on Capitol Hill, we would have a lot more visibility. And this would be good for the program, and it would also be good for all the people who visit Washington. This is not finalized yet, but we are working very hard on getting it done. Last October, we changed NLS's name. We got rid of outdated and offensive terms, and now it's called the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. We expect to serve a broader range of readers, as I said, in the future, including people with dyslexia and similar reading disabilities. So we're working on a huge project to re-engineer and modernize our information technology systems, including BARD. This is a big project that we have started. We've got a lot of work yet to do on. We've got additional funding from Congress to do this, and what the end result will be a much better experience for BARD users and also a lot more capacity for BARD users. The NLS program has a lot going on at the national level, but none of this would work if it weren't for our state partners. So I want to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to the Arizona Braille and Talking Book Library, to Janet and your staff, and to each of your predecessors and their staff, to all of the volunteers, to your state officials, and everyone who works together to make this project work. You've worked faithfully and expertly to serve the residents of Arizona over the past 50 years to ensure that all may read. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I feel like doing standing ovation or a wave or something, but I'm sorry you wouldn't feel you wouldn't feel it, or would definitely feel appreciated. And it has been a pleasure for us to have you, as well as the other speakers, Secretary Hobbs, Bob Kresmer, and Eddie Richardson, join us on this day. And for our audience to join us, taking our mind off of the current situation around the United States and the world, and just remembering the valuable services that we have in our state, in our nation, and just enjoying what we have and appreciating it. I know that I feel fortunate, as does our staff, to provide this library service in Arizona, and we look forward to many more years with these innovative ideas and efforts funneling down from NLS to our library here. So I just want to thank you all for coming and wish you a great day. And if you have any questions or comments, contact the library. And when you're ready for an audio copy of today's speeches, get in touch with your reader advisor or contact the library. Thank you so much. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Bye-bye.